Hello and welcome to Unacademy, the one-stop solution for an English medium UPSC Civil Services aspirant. Today I welcome you all to another set of 6 issues out of the Hindu newspaper, Delhi edition. Good morning to all of you. I hope that you know the most important development as of yesterday, which is that the prelims has been postponed from 26th May to 16th of June 2024. 3 weeks have been provided to you, and there's a video which has been made by me itself telling you how to go forward and how to use this extra time. So I hope that you will watch that also, as you already watched with regards to that, and you're aware about the postponement of the prelims examination on account of the general elections. Thereafter, there's a very important session which already Mukesh sir has already taken in the morning at 7 a.m., which is NCERT fundamentals. He's taken temperature and isotherms, and at 1 p.m. we have a very interesting session by Chetan sir with regards to Prime Ministers and Indian foreign policy. He'll be talking about PV Narasimha Rao today. So this is at 1 p.m. This was already at 7 a.m. I hope that you were part of it. This is a totally free class. You don't have to pay anything. You just have to download the Unacademy app, and on the app you will get these 2 classes itself. And as it is, all the links are given in the description box, and I hope that you will find them properly. Thereafter, let's look at the topics we are going to discuss for today. The topics today are a good mix of GS paper 2, 1 and 3, in the sense that we have India's neighborhood first policy, which is our Prime Minister's own understanding. With regards to Bhutan, we will discuss what is the idea here. Then we have MSP, and though this article is not very comprehensive, it gives a certain solution which is very important with regards to our farmers. So GS paper 3, this was a GS paper 2, and thereafter we have the nomenclature of cancer and how that needs to change to make our understanding better. This is again the concept of science and technology. So GS paper 3, very, very important. Thereafter, we have 3 or 4 very straightforward articles in that sense. First is that the Indian Railways gains a lot out of cancellation of tickets. Thereafter, the concept of forced labor, and a very small discussion on Israel with regards to what it is doing. Though the article itself is not very, very important, we have to discuss the tactics what are there. And once these 6 topics are over, we'll talk about the mains question so that you can also practice these topics in that sense. I hope that you are also going on Telegram. After this session gets over, the questions, 5 questions related to these topics are uploaded on our Telegram channel. The link is also given in the description box, and you can then check, did you learn something out of these sessions itself. So with this, let's begin our analysis for today with the first topic, which is the ties that epitomize India's neighborhood first policy. Now, why is this article generally important? Because the author is a former Indian ambassador to Bhutan, and he talks about certain very interesting aspects about this relationship. And he's used a terminology which in turn gives us an understanding and can come in the examination with regards to how we have to understand our neighbors. Now, again, as always, I'll give you the basic understanding, then we'll go to nitty-gritty, and then we will revise in the same session itself. Let's try to understand what is he trying to argue. Now, when we talk about India and we talk about Bhutan, we have a very, over the period of time, historically, a very good relationship. We have certain treaties in which this friendship is also envisaged. But the fact with regards to India and Bhutan is size. In the sense, India is a mega country in front of Bhutan itself, with the population, with the market, with regards to its diversity. India is on a different scale altogether. Bhutan, on the other hand, would be the opposite of India with regards to that. A very small country, landlocked. More than that, it is surrounded by 2 major nuclear powers also. But on the other hand, Bhutan's stature, size, in a way should have dictated its foreign policy, or India's foreign policy towards Bhutan should have been in that context, which is size and scale. So when it comes to our neighbors, Bhutan is that neighbor which is basically a very, very small country vis-a-vis economy, polity, even democracy with regards to population, and therefore size and scale matters. And specifically India, Bhutan, the size and scale aspect should have mattered. The question is, this should have mattered because India could have easily dominated Bhutan with regards to any policy, with regards to anything we wanted from Bhutan in that regard. However, India historically has shown, and this is very, very important, and this is the very important point which this article makes, is that size doesn't matter. Size doesn't matter. The argument which this article tells us is that India has shown that for India, the size of the country doesn't matter, because if we wanted, we would have dominated Bhutan easily with regards to size and scale in all aspects. And therefore, if the size aspect would have mattered, India would have dominated. So we treat Bhutan as an equal, and this equal relationship is something very, very important, and it manifests itself in multiple forms. So the basic argument here is, we always look at Bhutan as an equal partner irrespective of its size, and therefore India, through its neighbor first policy or neighborhood first policy, has made sure that Bhutan doesn't feel that we are bullying it. Because China is known to do that, US is known to do that, even UK at its heydays used to do it, but India hasn't. India never uses a card with regards to population, with regards to economy, with regards to size, with regards to military strength vis-a-vis Bhutan, and we have been an equal partner in the development of the Bhutanese economy, Bhutanese concept itself. So that way, it is very, very important to realize and understand that India has never allowed size to come in between these two, in this relationship in that regard. This is the first thing which the article points out. This is very important because they can give you a question in which they can say that India-Bhutanese relationship, I've given you a mains question like that itself, that India-Bhutanese relationship shows that size doesn't really matter. What really matters is a outlook. How is India's outlook towards its neighbors, and that should be understood within the same context itself. And therefore, Bhutanese size doesn't matter. The first thing. Now, the second thing which you need to understand, is the manifestation. How has this relationship manifested itself? Because in a way, India respects the identity of Bhutan. It respects the religion of Bhutan. Further, it respects the economy and political sovereignty of Bhutan in that sense. And therefore, this should manifest itself in certain places. And it is here that there's a very interesting project which this article talks about, which is not in the news too much, but it's a quite interesting development. Now, when we talk about manifestations, if you have basic understanding of international relations, you would know that when it came to Doklam, when it came to border disputes, India-Bhutan have shown a certain sense of coordination. Doklam issue, the tri-junction issue itself was a problem, and Bhutan allowed the Indian forces to enter into its territory and guard that zone itself. So in that regard, military cooperation, and when it comes to the protecting the sovereignty of Bhutan, India has always been up for it. However, recently there have been irritants also. There have been multiple irritants, and China being the most important one. Bhutan, in a way, has shown that it is also trying to develop an independent relationship with China, because they had a certain conference in which 3 points of dispute in their northern sector, in north of Bhutan, were going to be basically sorted out with the Chinese. Nepal has also taken that type of an approach. Bhutan is also trying to take that approach. So the relationship is not all is well, but in a way there is a little bit of the Chinese factor which comes in. Now, this article talks about the most important point of trust, the most important point of cooperation, which is called hydroelectricity. Hydroelectricity is something, or hydel powers or hydel projects are something in which India is helping Bhutan use its rivers and manifest and in a way use its potential for hydroelectricity. India gets the surplus electricity, but the fact of the matter is, when it comes to cooperation, hydroelectric power is very, very important in that sense. The second point is that India has also given a lot of money in the development projects. And as of right now, India is one of the major contributor to the Bhutan's 12th what is called 12th 5-year plan, in that sense, in which India is contributing with developmental aid also. But why are we discussing this topic is because of a certain word which has been used, which is called the Galefa, what we call as mindfulness city. Galefa, mindful, or Galefu, sometimes written like this also, Galefu, mindful city or mindfulness city. Now, Galefu is important wherein the idea of an SEZ has been pushed in. The idea of an SEZ has been pushed in. Let me write it in the proper sense. You have the concept of Galefu. Galefu. This is a very important term which comes or becomes relevant for your examination. Now, Galefu, the mindful city, is a concept which basically Bhutan has argued that it will produce what is called a special economic zone, which is quite unlike Bhutan, because Bhutan is always very environmentally conscious. But this SEZ in Galefu is going to be very simply a city which will talk about meditation, about yoga, about rest, relaxation. And therefore, this will be a zone within Bhutan, wherein a lot of foreign investment can be pushed in, and this will be developed as a city which is known for its mindfulness, the Buddhist idea of how we go forward with regards to our desires and understandings. So therefore, this Galefu SEZ is a very important opportunity for India, because we have both soft power understanding and cultural ties. Because when we talk about meditation, when we talk about yoga, it is something which India can also contribute to. And this is one thing which becomes very, very important for the examination, because this is not in the news too much. However, India is very closely developing this project in the sector itself, and therefore this term becomes very, very important. Now, a very important question which would be coming into a lot of your minds with regards to what I told you, which is that prelims has been postponed. Just as an afterthought, I will tell you one thing. Now, for at least 1 month, the current affairs becomes more relevant, because if we had stopped reading the newspaper maybe by April, now we have to read it through April, because the examination has gone to June. Though it could be that UPSC has already made the question paper by February, March, they mostly decide on what are the questions which they will push for May, but there could also be a chance that by pushing this date, they may change the set of the question if it has not gone from printing. So remember this point, that now all of this becomes important for you if you are giving it for 2024. Previously, it may not have been, and therefore we have to reorient in that regard. And that is why we will also reorient with regards to Conquer Prelims. It was, we are going to launch it, but the idea was a certain time scale. We will also reorient with regards to making sure that your understanding and your preparation is properly there. So remember, for a student for 2024, this again becomes very, very relevant and important. Previously, it may not have been, but now it is. For at least 1 month now, your current affairs is very, very relevant. So Galefu as a term becomes very, very interesting and important. Now, as I said, the article is not very extensive. The idea is very simple. India, Bhutan, size never has mattered, will not matter, and our Prime Minister has made sure that there is reciprocity. If the King of Bhutan is coming, the Prime Minister is also visiting Bhutan from time to time. In a way, to be very honest, with the countries which we are actually dealing with, the US, Australia, be it the Southeast Asian sector, be it Russia, we should never have cared about Bhutan, because Bhutan in size and scale is very, very low. However, we have made sure that this type of understanding never comes in between this relationship, and therefore, be it Galefu, be it the concept of hydroelectric power cooperation, or be it the idea that very simply, the developmental project, the respect to identity, religion and economy, all of this has made sure that India-Bhutan relationships are still in the right zone. But as I said, this is a very, very dangerous slippery slope, because of the fact that there is a very important player which is trying to destabilize that, which is China. China has been doing that to Nepal also. China has been doing that to Bhutan also. And please remember, in any question which comes in with regards to Bhutan, you have to talk about the Chinese connection and the Chinese angle in that sense. So let's try to go into the finer points of the article, and then we'll go forward with regards to the article itself. So the first point is that if you look at the scale of these two countries, Bhutan with only 38,000 square kilometers and a population of 7.7 lakh, maybe in a certain area in Delhi, Bangalore or Mumbai, if I take 10 kilometers, there would be more people than this. And therefore, very simply, when it comes to a country which is India with 140 crore population and 3.28 million square kilometers, Bhutan has no basic comparison. However, this metric has never ever challenged or has never come in between the relationship between India and Bhutan, wherein we have always made sure that under neighborhood first, we treat them as equals. Further, we don't, and we made sure that size does not matter concept comes into this relationship. We have always respected the Bhutanese identity, their unique religion and their sovereignty, and therefore Bhutan knows that in its south, and India is not a threat to its sovereignty. This is a very important point. This is the relationship which is built on strength. This is the strength of this relationship. Now, how does this strength manifest itself? How does this trust manifest itself? The idea is that we have the Galefu project which is coming up, which is a mindfulness city, and therefore this is a special economic zone which will be developed, which will bring in business and also lead to a lot of employment generation within Bhutan in that regard. And the idea is it will be a relaxation, spa, yoga space, and a lot of investment can come into Bhutan. Second is hydropower or hydel power, which is very, very interesting because India is developing the same with regards to Nepal also, but that has gone into a certain problematic zone with no real headway with regards to how water will be used. But Bhutan is allowing that to happen. Further, we also have the idea that we are the biggest major development assistance partner when it comes to Bhutan with regards to 5,000 crores which we have given for their 12th five-year plan. So when it comes to money, when it comes to hydroelectric power, when it comes to basic cooperation and SEZs, we are everywhere there. We are making sure that we are helping Bhutan become what it should. However, for the problem, and this is where the irritant comes in, is China. China is doing three things, and this is very, very important for us to understand. China is doing three things. First thing is that it is, as of right now, creating a rhetoric where it is making the Bhutanese people feel that India is basically controlling it indirectly. Though this doesn't look good from the mouth of China, because China does the same, we are actually not doing it. But there's a certain sentiment in Bhutan which is changing, with the youth being influenced by Chinese propaganda. And therefore, that is one thing where India needs to counter this feeling and create a certain sense of idea that India is therefore to respect the Bhutanese and not to, in a way, create a certain sense of control. Second is, Bhutan itself is also seeing that China for the first time is ready to speak on equal terms. In a way, a relationship which India established, and therefore Bhutanese understanding with regards to China saying that let's solve these issues is something which is enticing Bhutan quite a lot. The idea that Bhutan is getting equal partnership with China is something new to the Bhutanese itself. And again here, India needs to play a role and make sure that the coziness, the closeness in this relationship does not go too far. And further, China is actively also trying to undercut the diplomatic ties by making sure that it becomes a very important development partner in Bhutan. This is the new model of Chinese, what is called new imperialism, which is give them so much money that they will never be able to repay it back. And Bhutan is also on the list with regards to the concept of surrounding India with all neighbors anti-India in that regard. China is trying to push a lot of money into Bhutan. And in this SEZ project, there is a risk that Chinese companies also, in a way, with a Buddhist connection in that regard, start to push in a lot of money. That would be a problematic aspect. So Bhutan may become, like previously, a certain ground or a site at which India and China may lock horns. And therefore, This is what we need to be mindful of. Now, what do you take out of this basic discussion? As I said, and as we always say, nothing unnecessary, nothing more, nothing less, whatever is important for the examination. Now, with regards to that, what you remember is, you have to remember Gilefu, because that can come as a certain question in the examination. They can give you just the term itself and it could be coming in the examination. Second, you also have to understand that the Bhutanese, China, India, this trilogy in that regard is a developing concept. There could be a moment in which we need to understand it in the right context itself also. And there are multiple irritants, but there's a trust which Bhutan has on India. Now, how do we make sure that that remains is something that India needs to make sure that it does not mess up this whole process by pushing too much on Bhutan. And at the same point of time, hydroelectricity with Nepal has also turned out to be a little bit of a hairy situation, because the idea is that Nepal is now saying that we don't care about the electricity, we care about the water. And therefore, with Bhutan, the same things can happen. There are certain delays which are happening right now with certain projects. There was a certain grand project also which was introduced, in which private partnership was brought into, but that has totally failed in Bhutan. No private partnership based, no private investment happened in a Bhutan hydropower project, so that we have scrapped itself. But this is an ongoing relationship. So please understand this point, that this article itself gives us an opportunity to have a certain conversation with regards to Bhutan itself. But further, it also allows us to understand a very simple point, which is that China will try to mess it up. We need to make sure that we are having this relationship based on the same principles as we had previously. Now, with this, let's move to the second article, which deals with a very, what we call as problematic issue as of right now, which is MSP, and it says guaranteed MSP is an ethical imperative. Ethical imperative means that it is our duty and responsibility that MSP is guaranteed to the farmer. Now, here again, it's not a very extensive article, but it points out to two very interesting things. Now, again, MSP farmers issue is something which you can expect in the examination, obviously, with regards to the coverage, with regards to whatever is happening in the different zones and what you're seeing in and around Delhi, and generally the farmers bill being an issue which basically got repealed, but the issue remains. Now, the heart of that issue is MSP. At the heart of this issue is MSP, which is minimum support price. Now, the concept of MSP is very simple. I'll not give you the economic technical aspects of it, but I'll give it to you in this most simplest way possible. MSP is the price at which the government will procure from the farmers. It is the minimum support price, which is basically under it the government will not procure. And this is decided after looking at the prevailing market rates, looking at the basic demand and supply, import and export, and basically MSP becomes the guiding light for the market in the sense, and WTO doesn't like it because they believe that it distorts the market itself. It in a way does and doesn't also, but the idea is that MSP is the guiding light for market prices. The market prices which will prevail, the idea is that MSP should be the guiding light. Now, MSP is a centrally produced price list in that regard, and this basically decides in all the APMCs at the state level, the agri marketplaces, it's the price at which the farmer will get will fetch, or what a crop will fetch to a farmer. Now, all of this is done centrally with regards to the Commission of Agricultural Costs and Procurement deciding what is called the CACP, Agricultural Cost and Procurement. This will decide it. The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs will also in a way say that yes, this price is fine. And in a way, the center has said that this is the MSP. For example, that for wheat, we will give it for 1100, and for rice, the minimum support price is going to be 1200, which means that nobody should in theory be able to procure rice and wheat lower than this cost. This is the basic idea. I'm not going into the nitty-gritties. I'm not going to into the concept of A2 plus FL. I'm not going into C2. I'm not going to the ideas which are there behind MSP. That is not the purpose here. The purpose is very straightforward. The purpose is to understand what are the flaws which the article is pointing out in this system. Now, between you and me, very simply, if the center has decided, if there's a certain MSP which has been pushed in, and MSP in India is not pushed in for 1, 2, but actually 22 plus 1, which is 23 different crops. 22 plus 1 because 22 MSP, one is sugarcane, which has the concept of fair and remunerative prices, which is much more better managed in that regard, wherein there's a certain concept of legally binding idea. That is the basic idea of this article also. So we have 23 certain crops in that regard, out of which 21 are food crops. So MSP decides how much you and me will buy wheat and rice for. So in a way, the whole market price, the basic demand and supply, everything will be decided by MSP in that regard. Now, theoretically, if I'm a farmer, I have two options. Either the Food Corporation of India, FCI, is buying wheat and rice. FCI will most probably buy it at MSP, either very close to it or 1%, 2% above the MSP. However, this form of procurement is mostly rare and is generally very, very institutionalized, and the level of production will never, FCI can't buy everything. So the other opportunity which the farmer has is to go to the APMC, which is his state agricultural marketplace, and therefore he will sell his wheat, rice, whatever it may be, except for sugarcane, in this APMC. Now, theoretically, the MSP should also be a guiding light here, that below MSP prices, APMC should not be able to procure from farmers. But what this article is pointing out, and now please pay attention, what this article is actually pointing out is that the farmers are not getting the MSP at APMCs, and that is the whole basic point. The idea is that in APMCs, there is so much internal, what we call as connivance, there is so much, in a way, corruption also, that MSP is not taken into account, and they are selling below MSP prices 10 to 15%. 10 to 15%. Now, if there is 10 to 15% deficit here, the farmer's income goes down, and that puts him into a certain, what we call as vicious cycle of debt, and that could lead to farmer suicides in that regard. Now, the idea here is, the basic problem is that MSP is not a statutory price, in the sense that there's no legal basis to MSP, in the sense that it's not that the government has made a law that you cannot sell below MSP. This is the problem which the article is pointing out, which is there's no legally binding provision. There is no offense if you don't buy at MSP, which may not be the case, for sugarcane, where the sugar mills are in a way monitored quite a lot, and anybody who's selling the sugarcane below the fair and remunerative prices, there's a certain consequence. However, when it comes to MSP, there is no certain such consequence. So the idea which this article floats, and it could be a good solution which you can write in the examination, is that we need a certain legal basis to MSP in that regard, and therefore we have to make sure that there are legal repercussions if a APMC is not buying the wheat and rice at the MSP or below it. And therefore, this is our ethical imperative. It is you and me, it is our imperative, you as the future IAS of India, that we need to make sure that our farmers are not duped, they are not getting what they should get because of no legal basis in that regard. And therefore, this is a very interesting point which is made. So the first point which this article makes is that the systemic problem is no legal basis. And the data is given that only 6% of farmers in India as of right now are able to actually fetch the MSP prices. Most of them do not get MSP prices at local mandis or APMCs or whatever access to market they have, and therefore with no legal basis, with no legal recourse, they are not able to get anything. Now the second thing which he says is that there should also be what is called forward and backward linkages, in the sense that in order to make sure that MSP does not become so critical that if you don't sell it on MSP, we need to also make sure that we have what you call price based AI models. We should have what is called market intelligence, that you understand that the farmer understands the market also. We need to have supply chain, what we call as bottlenecks issued, removed in that regard. And further, we also should have transportation, cold storages, which are much bigger systemic problems in the agriculture sector of India. But the idea is to make sure that MSP does not become so critical. We have to make sure that there is other further forward backward linkage also. So this article is pointing out to a problem and is also giving us a solution. And that ways, this could be a very interesting answer which you could give in the, see, you could be asked that how do we solve this conundrum? How do we solve this problem? And the way we solve this problem is through understanding how the MSPs are not being properly implemented. Further, we have to make sure that if there's a legal basis, we also integrate the whole system together. So see, the perennial issue as of right now is that there are no legal assurances of MSP. And therefore, with no legal mandates, the fact is that the food production in India and the farmer is exposed to a lot of different vulnerabilities. Now, with 23 different crops, out of which 21 being food crops, the fact is only 6% of the farmers in India are benefiting from MSP, are getting a price over and above or at MSP itself, mostly coming from Punjab and Haryana in that sense. And therefore, most transactions involving essential foods occur below MSP and rendering farmers economically unviable and farming itself as unviable, which creates a certain dangerous cycle, which in turn puts them into debt. And therefore, though the MSP concept is there, it is not being implemented in the right way, or there is no implementation monitoring at the lowest level possible. Now, further, the solution which the article gives us is that we have to either make minor amendments into the APMC Acts, which is the state mandate, or Centre's Essential Commodities Act, which would in turn ensure that no transaction with a farmer can happen under the MSP. This basically makes sure that MSP remains what it should, and therefore it will also safeguard the farmer. Further, we need to have backward and forward linkages with MSP itself, which would include crop planning, market intelligence, the idea of pre-sowing measures, post-harvest infrastructure, storages, and we have the idea of post-harvest care also of the farmer. Now, this is much more bigger, this is more systemic, but this is an interesting point which this article points out. Now, let me then give you the basic gist of this article. You need to understand what has the article pointed out. It has pointed out to us that the MSP, though being the guiding light for market prices, it should be theoretically not a problem. There is no legal basis or legally binding provision under which that the MSP, if you are selling below MSP, there is no legal consequence in that regard. And only 6% of farmers in India are actually getting MSP or over and above MSP prices. And therefore, the problem is that there is no legal assurance. So, what is the solution to this? The solution to this, what it is pointing out, is that we either amend the APMC Acts of the state or the Essential Commodities Act of the center and add a legal provision under which there would be repercussions for MSP or under MSP selling, under MSP buying in that regard. And this would make sure with forward and backward linkages that the farmers in India will be protected and MSP will be true to its own purpose in that regard, which is true. If MSP is not able to in a way give the guiding light and farmers are buying at a lower price than MSP, or rather selling at a lower price than MSP, then it makes no sense itself. So an interesting article gives you a problem, gives you a solution. Do note these solutions because they will help you in the larger context of the examination, and this will come in the mains examination for sure with the amount of coverage which has been there in the newspapers and in the news itself generally. With this, we move to the third article, which is equally interesting, which is based on the idea of how do we name cancers, and there's a problem in doing that. It says changing cancer nomenclature can improve treatment outcomes. This is what doctors argue. Now, what is the concept? The concept is very straightforward. The concept is that when we give names to cancers or cancer as a disease, we give it according to its location. For example, you would have heard about, for example, lung cancer. We hear breast cancer. We have liver cancer. We have pancreatic cancer. Now, we have bone cancer, for example. Now, this nomenclature is according to the location of the what we call as melanemic molecules or melanemic tumors. They are basically tumors which are what we call as melanemic, which is basically having cancer cells in it. Now, the idea is very simple, that the location of the cancer decides its treatment. So when we talk about the treatment, when we talk about diagnosis and any form of assistance, any form of medical care is based on the location of the cancer. This is a very important nomenclature concept which we have as of right now. Nomenclature happens according to location, according to treatment assistance, everything is according to location. Lung cancer, you have the following medicines. For this cancer, we have the following medicines. Now, what the article, and it's the science page basically specific to the Delhi edition, page number Roman 2, it says that we need to abandon this concept. We need to abandon this concept because it is doing two things. First is that it is delaying most forms of treatment. Treatment is being delayed. Second, if there's a drug or if there's a medicine which helps against cancer, the clinical trials based on location are again delaying the process of it getting involved or used in other places. And further, this may be okay as a form of telling where the cancer is. This is not good because every cancer is different. Every cancer is different. So the argument which this article makes very beautifully is that the genetic makeup or the genetic makeup of the cancer should be used to decide what should be its treatment, and we need to change the nomenclature. What do I mean by genetic makeup in the sense is that I could have lung cancer, breast cancer, I could also have cervical cancer, I could also have testicular cancer, I could also have, for example, bone cancer and pancreatic cancer. Though they are basically all different when it comes to the location, it could be that in certain patients, the same tumor emerges in all of these 6. Meaning that if we go for the genetic scan of trying to understand what is the genetic makeup, how are these cells being formed, what is their basic genomic sequencing, if I go for this genetic makeup and genetic analysis, it turns out it is similar. Now, theoretically, to be very honest, and this is logical, if I use a medicine X on this cell, it should automatically work on breast cancer and all the other ones also, because this medicine works on this protein. It is basically a protein. So this medicine works on this protein. It is able to deactivate the protein and therefore you become cancer free. Cancer can be also in a way what is called static and mobile, what is called metastasis, in the sense that if you have lung cancer, it is only in one place, but it can also spread. When it basically starts to spread, it's called metastasis. Then you call it 4th stage cancer, and mostly survival in that is very, very difficult. But the reason for that is because if it starts to spread, what happens is that we have for everyone a different medicine. And this is the problem. The problem is that though the genetic makeup of that tumor is similar in all of them, the fact is that this medicine was only being used for lung. And now we need a whole clinical trial to accredit it for this, for this. Basically, what the article is pointing out is that if we have the genetic makeup or we understand the genetics of that tumor, and if we can understand that there are proteins which basically, so rather than classifying them according to location, if we classify them according to protein, then it may help us in creating a medicine which could be used in 5 different locations but is effective in each one of them. This is a very interesting article. This is a French study which has happened recently, that we are basically putting ourselves within silos, and these silos are not allowing for treatment and diagnosis at the right time, because by the time we understand the genetics of it, it is already too late. And even if I have this X for lung cancer, I cannot use it for breast cancer, because the idea is there needs to be a proper trial for that, and accreditation needs to come from the drug agencies in that sense. So therefore, what I mean to say is that this is a very interesting way of understanding diseases. The idea that now that we have the capability of understanding the genetic makeup of proteins, the idea of how we can scan for certain proteins in the body itself, why can't we also diagnose and in a way treat according to protein? Why is that we are within the location? Location is important because every cell is different, every location is different, every location decides what is the nature of the cells, but the protein may be different, and therefore protein makeup is very, very important to understand. That is the basic point of this article, though it is quite a technical one. I'm trying to give you a basic idea. Nomenclature according to location should not be there, rather nomenclature according to the idea that genetic makeup can help us solve the conundrum with regards to multiple forms of drugs being used on multiple forms of cancers. So let's try to understand this in the proper context. We, as of right now, classify cancers according to their location. Whichever location they are, that is where we call it lung, this, that. However, we should categorize them on the basis of not of just of tissue of origin, which is location, but also on their molecular characteristics, which is the genetic characteristics in that sense. Now, with technology going where it is right now, we are able to understand what are the genetic mutations which are happened in the cells, which in turn led for a tumor to rise. Now, all cancers from the same organ do not always share the same mutations, and therefore these mutations aren't limited to cancer on a single person. This means that it could be that there could be 3 points at which 3 different locations where I have cancer. However, the genetic mutation in all 3 could be different. In the same way, there could be 3 people having 3 different types of cancers, but they could have the same genetic makeup. So basically, the genomic, what we call as the mutation of the cell, can be specific to a person, could be general in 3 to 4 people, and therefore that is a very interesting way of understanding how we understand the larger concept in that sense. So this is a very important point, that same organ origin could not mean that the mutation in other organs is the same. Same organ origin does not mean that me and a person other than that have the same, or we could have the same mutation, we could have different mutations also. So therefore, just calling all of them lung cancer makes no sense, because maybe there are 50% of the people who have a certain protein lung cancer, the other 50 has a different type protein lung cancer. Now, if I ask you this question, and very simply if I ask you, does the same medicine work on both the proteins? The answer is a very big no, because the 50% it may work, in 50% the efficacy or the efficiency may be lower, and therefore it doesn't work like that. Now, this development in precise or precision oncology study of cancer itself, requires cancer to be classified on their molecular and genetic characteristics rather than organ in which they originate. This is a very important point it is making. And the argument is, by not doing this, basically in 2012 it was seen that there was a certain drug called nivolumab. Nivolumab was used on a certain what we call as melanoma, which is skin cancer, and kidney cancer. This was going to help, and it was able to help other proteins also. In a way, this could have been used in other forms of cancer also. However, it was not used because of the fact that we needed to have proper study on how it works on others. It is proven that nivolumab can be used against a certain protein, but because you need for every location based cancer treatment a different medicine and different accreditation, therefore even when this was available, people could not use it. And this is actually the problem. Even when it was available, people could not use it. And therefore, what it does is, this is called sequential testing. This is called sequential testing, that I will use it on one, then I will use it on the next one, then I will use it on the next one, knowing that all three are the same protein. But I have to do test on the first, then the second, then the third. All three have to be accredited separately. This is the problem. Further, there is also challenges to what we are proposing here. This is a very easy way of saying it. What I propose to you, what this article proposed to you is, let's do one thing. Let us now try to understand mutations. Let us try to also very simply understand cancers according to proteins. But there's a challenge. The first challenge is that you need to do specific tests for this. Cancer, when it comes to their genetic mutations, you need genetic tests to check the molecular alterations. Now, these tests can range from 7,000 to 40,000 to 3 lakh according to location, and accessibility and availability is a problem. And with India, where healthcare as it is, it's a very major issue when it comes to how we actually understand how the costs of treatment is also already very, very high. It is very, very clear that there could be a situation in which people cannot afford this. Further, we need a big sample size. We need a big sample size, which is that if we don't have enough cases to show that the same protein is affecting everyone, we cannot go ahead. So this testing needs to happen at a very significant scale. And last but not the least is, we cannot also fully abandon the location concept, because location decides the nature of cells. So again, after going through all of this, what is the basic gist? I'll give you the gist of this article, then we'll revise for the first two, and then we will look at the prelims tidbit section. Now, the first concept was that we tried to understand how India-Bhutan relationships have never been established on the basis of size. We have always transcended that concept itself. And the first article argued that we have respected, we have always helped Bhutan in all situations, and therefore does size matter argument with regards to diplomatic relationship. India-Bhutan is a very good concept with regards to that. The second article, we argued that when it comes to MSP, though MSP is there as a very important safeguard, the legal implementation of something like this is problematic. There are no legal safeguards, or there is no legal implication for selling below MSP, and therefore there was a need to make MSP as a concept of proper, and listen to me, proper legally binding, or the concept of having legal provisions which would allow people selling under MSP to be prosecuted in some way or the other. Now, the article which we discussed right now argues for the following. It says that we, as of right now, characterize cancer according to location. This is the first thing. Now, the second thing is that this leads to issues because there could be the same type of cancer in 3 different places. The cancer mutation may be the same, but location would be different. So therefore, we have to diagnose each of them separately. The treatment is also separate for all 3. So what do we need to understand is the genetic characteristic of that mutation is very, very important to understand. So let's do that. Let's try to understand the genetic mutations, and therefore we should characterize according to genetic mutations. But what are the challenges for that? The challenges is, firstly, this test is very, very expensive. Accessibility and availability would be an issue across India generally. The sample size in a country like India should be big. So therefore, testing needs to happen on a very big war footing in that regard. And last but not the least, and the most important concept is that location still matters. So why we had this discussion? Because you can get a question with regards to not specific to cancer. That is not the reason why we're discussing this. We're discussing this because you should have the capability of understanding that genomic studies, genetic mutations can change the way we can also treat the diseases which are already there. And therefore, this is very, very important in that regard. Now, after this, let's go into the prelims tidbit section. The first discussion we need to have was an article which was basically on Israel. And the Israel article argued that, very simply, that the UN is arguing that when it comes to the war against Hamas, Israel has now reached to a point where it is basically going to starve the Palestinians, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and that is how they're going to get basically the Hamas threat out of Israel itself, and that is how they're tackling this issue in that regard. Now, this is not good. In that regard, this is, and there's no substantial argument. There were only quotes of different personalities coming from the UN itself. The argument is this is against basic human ethics, and more than that, Israel is now becoming desperate. The war has been going on since October. This is not how you treat the people of Palestine. The people of Palestine and Hamas are different, and that distinction needs to be there. As of right now, it is a pathetic situation with aid being airdropped. And we've seen a lot of videos with regards to how America and other NATO countries are doing that. Now, please be very, very clear. Israel has become desperate and has basically stopped everything. Starvation is their answer, but they should understand one more thing, which is that the people will rather suffer and Hamas will still survive. And that is why that article is important, because this is the basic update for the Israeli conflict. Now, a very interesting article came out in the news section of the paper, which is that you and me, we buy what we call as railway tickets. Sometimes we buy under what we call as a waiting list, and we believe and we hope that it may become RAC or it may become confirmed. And if it doesn't get confirmed, the ticket gets cancelled. There are certain fees which the Indian Railways will cut and return the money back to you. Or the idea is that cancellation, the amount which the Indian Railways cuts is a very, very small amount. However, the revenue it is generating is actually quite substantial. The Indian Railways earnings have clocked to 1,200 crores from only cancelled waiting list tickets between 2021 and 2024. This is an RTI which was put in. This is very interesting data. And what has been revealed is that, for instance, in 2021, 2.53 crore tickets were on waiting list and were cancelled. So they got 200 crores here. Then this number rose to 4 crore, and then it rose to the 5 crore mark by 2023, generating close to 505 crores as just cancellation fees. Now, for you and me, it is a small amount, but the Indian Railways is a very big amount. Now, the idea is that if there are 720 seats in one train, 600 waiting list still is actually given. Now, obviously, you know that a waiting list 100, 150 will never get confirmed, but we still buy it and we give the cancellation fees. And in that regard, Indian Railways is gaining quite a lot out of this. It's not a point of criticism, but this is a point of interesting way of how revenue can be generated from a very small amount in that regard also. With this, the second one is a very concerning one, which is an ILO report, which is the International Labour Organization, has pointed out that as of right now in the world, forced labor still exists and is generating $36 billion worth of profit every year. What does forced labor mean? That I may go into that contract as a form of voluntary basis with some form of pay, but over a period of time, I was, in a way, the pay was removed and I'm being forced to work. This is not proper bonded labor. Forced labor, you could also be getting such a meager amount that it is insignificant. Forced labor is when you're working against your will, and this is quite common in the Gulf countries with regards to Indian labor going there and their passports being seized and they're being made to work against their own will. And this is where the study talks about Indians in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and 37% of such illegal profits since 2014 has gone into producing even the Qatari football what we call as football matches. There was a proper controversy with regards to how those stadiums were made. The Football World Cup Qatar and Indians, that was not a good relationship at that point of time. And when it comes to that, forced labor was used quite a lot. And we have different names for these forms of forced labor, but the fact is forced labor still exists. And when it comes to the quantum of it, what we see is that 27.6 million people were engaged in forced labor in any given day, and 3.1% for every 1,000 people as of right now are in forced labor, which is not a good thing. And therefore, forced labor exists in India. It exists across the world, but in the Gulf countries more. Now, before we go to the mains question, let me summarize. What we've understood is today the first thing, which is how does the idea of size does not matter between India and Bhutan. Second, we discussed the legal issues with regards to MSP, how 6% of farmers only get MSP above what we call as remuneration. Third, we discussed the concept of using genetic characteristics to categorize cancer. Then we saw that Israel, in a way, is starving the Palestinians to win this battle. Then we saw how railways is gaining quite a lot from the cancellation fees. And last but not the least is the idea that forced labor exists in a period like 2024, where we talk about such big things to go to Mars. But in India and across the world, there are people who are working against their own will in some form of bonded or forced labor context. With this, let's look at the mains question. First is, the relationship between India and Bhutan shows that size doesn't matter. This is a very beautiful question which can come in GS paper 2, and it's a realistic question in that sense. Second is, creating legal safeguards and guarantees in MSP may be the answer to the farmers' problems. Do you agree? Again, this is GS paper 2, paper 3 question. This can come as a question, and it is already giving you a certain hint how to go forward. It is how you tackle this type of question. So with this, I would like to end the session. Thank you so much. I will see you soon with regards to comprehensive analysis, and I hope that you're following us on the Unacademy app as closely as we are trying to contribute to your journey in the most meaningful way. Thank you, take care, and bye-bye.